Well, good morning. Thank you for joining us. If it's your first time, we appreciate you stepping in. I know sometimes it's hard to come to a new place, but welcome. So April 1970, Apollo 13 was on what was supposed to be a routine mission. After all, the U.S. had put two sets of astronauts on the moon, and Apollo 13 was going to be the third. And can you imagine the excitement of these astronauts? One of the few that would walk on the moon. And that was all good until the second day when somebody decided to stir the oxygen tanks. And that caused an explosion. And a movie was made of this, but it's a famous phrase now. Jim Lovell, played by Tom Hanks, calls back and said, "Houston, we have a problem." Yeah, we do. All of a sudden, what was supposed to be a routine, unique experience has turned into something dangerous. I don't know if we're going to get back. In the movie, immediately they switch to mission control, and one of the people says, their heart rates are skyrocketing. Isn't that a picture of life? I mean, you're going along, life's good, and all of a sudden, like that, something changes, and the heart rates are skyrocketing. We've all been there. It was good, and all of a sudden, man, there's an issue, and fear takes over in our life. Anybody like living under fear? I don't. You don't. What does the resurrection of Jesus more than 2,000 years ago have to do with our fear? Well, I think it has a lot to do with it. I want to talk about that this morning. So if you got a Bible, if you'd open it to Mark 15 and 16. We'll start in chapter 15, verse 46, and go through chapter 16, 8, wrestling with this question. How does Jesus' resurrection impact our fear? How does Jesus' resurrection impact our fear? I want to take us back to Good Friday, that first Good Friday, 2,000 plus years ago. Jesus is in a mockery of a trial, has been convicted. I'll put the term in quotes. He's between two criminals. They've been on the cross, and it was the most brutal form of execution. Usually, if the elements didn't get to him or the beating didn't get to him, the prisoners died, the criminals died of asphyxiation. They lost the ability to breathe. And the Roman government would let people linger on the cross for days to send a message to any would-be criminals. But this is Friday. This is the Sabbath before the Passover. And the Jews have a law against having a body on a tree or on a cross. So they've asked Pilate, can you bring him down? And so what the Romans would do if they wanted to expedite death is they would break the legs of the person on the cross, that they would lose the ability to push up and breathe. So that's what we got going on here in John 19. It says, and the Jews, because it was the day of preparation so that the bodies would not remain on the cross on the Sabbath, for the Sabbath was a high day, asked Pilate that their legs might be broken and that they might be taken away. So the soldiers came and broke the legs of the first man and of the other who was crucified with him. But coming to Jesus, when they saw that he was already dead, they did not break his legs. But one of the soldiers pierced his side with a spear, and immediately blood and water came out. And this last action gets all kinds of thoughts from medical professionals, what was done and what was pierced. But it was a confirmation that Jesus was already dead. And that's what John is trying to communicate in the gospel. Jesus is dead on the cross. And remember, he was scourged twice. Probably the events of that have just taken life out of him. And so those who love Jesus ask for his body that they might give him a decent burial, and that's where we pick it up in Mark 15, verse 46. Joseph brought a linen cloth, took him down, wrapped him in the linen cloth, and laid him in a tomb which had been hewn out in the rock, and he rolled a stone against the entrance of the tomb. Now, people see where Jesus is buried. Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Joseph, were looking on to see where he was laid. So they know, okay, Jesus, he's been confirmed dead on a Friday. They took him down, wrapped him. He was buried in that tomb over there, so we know where it is. But the Sabbath is coming up, which starts at sundown on Friday and goes to sundown on Saturday, and you're not allowed to work. So these women want to anoint his body, but time has run out. So they can't do it again until Sunday morning. They don't want to do it after sundown on Saturday. It's dark. And so in Mark 16, we picked him up going to Jesus' tomb. Remember, they saw where he was laid to anoint his body. Mark 16, verse 1 says, when the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene and Mary took the mother of James and Salome, so you probably got 4 there, bought spices so they might come and anoint him. Very early on the first day of the week, which would be Sunday, they came to the tomb when the sun had risen. As soon as the sun comes up, they're going to get to work. But they got an issue getting to Jesus, and here it is in verse 3. They were saying to one another, who will roll away the stone for us from the entrance of the tomb? Those stones were pushed down into a lip, and they could be weighed in the tons. And so moving the stone's an issue. Moreover, the Jews, Jewish leadership, because they had heard the talk of resurrection, hey, Pilate, we don't want any rumors getting going. Will you give us a set of Roman guards to put in front of there just so the body stays in the tomb? We're going to keep that body in the tomb. Okay, they got their guard. So the women got this issue. They got a stone, they got the guard, they want to get to Jesus. How's this going to work out? But verse 4, they find out problem's been solved. Looking up, they saw that the stone had been rolled away, although it was extremely large. Yeah, it's really large. So now, well, they got segue to the tomb, remember, and they're going there to anoint his body, but they get another surprise when they get there in verses 5 and 6. Entering the tomb, they saw a young man sitting at the right wearing a white robe, and they were amazed. And he said to them, do not be amazed. You're looking for Jesus the Nazarene. Yep, they came to anoint his body. Who has been crucified? Yep, that guy. Certified dead on a Friday. Well, he's not here. He is risen. He is not here. Behold, here's the place where they laid him. We saw him certified dead Friday. We saw him wrapped up. We saw him put in the tomb. We saw the the rock put over the tomb. Time ran on us to anoint the body, so Sunday morning we're going back. How are we going to get in? The stone's been moved. We get there, and he ain't there. He isn't there. What happened? Well, this guy said he's risen from the dead. Well, that's a change of plans. What now? Here's what now. Verse 7. The same one, angel, who's doing the speaking says, but go, tell his disciples and Peter, he's going ahead of you to Galilee. There you will see him just as he told you. Jesus said this was going to happen. I'm going to be crucified, certified dead, but I'm going to rise from the dead. I'm going to go into Galilee and I'll meet you there. This is not new. Jesus has been telling them this. But it raises a question. Go tell his disciples. Remember, his disciples were the closest, his closest associates. There was 12. One of them betrayed him. That was Judas. He's gone. So there's 11. These guys are supposed to be they're going to push forward the mission of the church when Jesus resurrects and ascends into heaven. Well, where are they? Where are they? Well, thank you for asking. They're in a locked room. Why? Because they are scared. They are afraid. There's a word. Fear. They've given in to fear. You done that before? Can't be where you're supposed to be because you've given in to fear. Talks about the disciples and Peter. Well, why'd you single Peter out? Well, Peter really gave in to fear. Gave his word to Jesus. Man, when Jesus was telling him this was going to happen, Peter said, man, it ain't happening, man. I'm going to fight for you. And Jesus said, no, you won't. No, you won't. Before the rooster crows, you'll deny me 3 times. Oh, no, I won't. Oh, but Peter did. Mark 14. This is while Jesus is on trial. This is before his crucifixion. He's with Caiaphas, and there's a courtyard, and here's what happens. It says, and Peter was below in the courtyard. One of the servant girls of the high priest came. Seeing Peter warming himself, she looked at him and said, hey, you also are with Jesus the Nazarene. Here's Peter's chance to stand up. No, but he denied it, saying, I neither know nor understand what you're talking about. And he went out on the porch. The servant girl saw him again once more to say to the bystanders, no, this is one of them. But he again denied it. And after a little while the bystanders were saying to Peter, surely you're one of them, you're Galilean too. But he began to curse and swear, I do not know this man you're talking about. Immediately a rooster crowed a second time. And Peter remembered how Jesus had made the remark to him, behold, a rooster crows twice, you will deny me 3 times. And he began to weep. You talk about a loser. Somebody who got crushed by fear. Peter. I mean, the loyal friend, I'm with you. You can count on me. No, you can't. And Peter bails because of fear. Give these women credit. At least they showed up at the tomb. Peter and friends are back locked in the tomb. So the angel said, man, you got to go talk to those guys. So that's the message in verse 8. It says, they went out and fled from the tomb, for trembling and astonishment gripped them. And they said nothing to anyone, for they were, what? Afraid. Man, fear's kind of ruling the first Easter morning, isn't it? This is the group that's supposed to run with the message that Jesus, remember, Jesus has been resurrected. Somebody's got to know. Somebody got to tell him. How did we get here? Somebody said something. But this first group fell flat. Well, Jesus is resurrected. He will make himself known. He will spend 40 days with them, and then he will ascend into heaven. The Holy Spirit will come on and this is recorded in the book of Acts, will come on those first believers. And it's on the disciples to take that message forward. How do you think you're going to do? How do you think you're going to do? What's their track record been? Not been good. Not been good. So they run into some problems. They run into some roadblocks. And we capture some of that first in Acts 4, 18 through 20. They've been preaching the gospel. The Jewish leadership who crucified Jesus doesn't like it. They've been preaching the resurrected Jesus. So when the leadership had summoned them, they commanded them not to speak or teach at all in the name of Jesus. But Peter, remember him? Remember Peter? Denied Jesus 3 times. Remember Peter, that guy? But Peter and John answered and said to them, whether it's right in the sight of God to give heed to you rather than to God, you be the judge. But, we cannot stop speaking about what we have seen and heard. Whoa. This is the guy who said, I don't know him. Now you got the Jewish leadership saying, you need to shut up or there's going to be I can't stop talking about that. That's not an outlier. There's one more recorded in the book of Acts, Acts 5, 27. When they brought them, they stood before the council. The high priest questioned them, saying, we gave you strict orders not to continue teaching in this name, and yet you have filled Jerusalem with your teaching and intend to bring the man's blood upon us. Yeah, you said you're guilty of Jesus' blood. But Peter and the apostles answered. Remember, Peter is highlighted here. We must obey God rather than man. What in the world happened to Peter? He met the resurrected Jesus. That's what happened to Peter. He met the resurrected Jesus, and he would not be controlled by fear any longer. You lived in fear? I have. Let me say from experience, it's a horrible way to live. Can't sleep, can't eat, can't. But what happened 2,000 years ago has something to do with our fear today. We're asking this question, how does the resurrection of Jesus impact our fear? Here's what I'd say. Embracing the resurrected Christ frees us from fear. Embracing the resurrected Christ frees us from fear. I loved our video. But it's a great example. You know what was keeping them from considering going to Africa? What's our word? Fear. And then Bethany talks about, I had this encounter with God, and the same God who called these people might be calling me. And now they're going. Fear. Embracing Christ allows us to live free of fear. So I swam in high school, and I was quite average. In fact, there were 18 of us on the team, and 16 of us fit in that average to good category, and I was right in that category. But we had 2 All-American swimmers on our team. And so I would be on a relay with these guys. I swam the backstroke. You go backstroke, 50 yards backstroke, 50 yards breaststroke, 50 yards butterfly, 50 yards freestyle. And our freestyler was one of those All-Americans, and he was coming back as a senior. He had set the state record as a junior. So I always swam with no pressure. when he was on the anchor of a relay. You know why? No matter how bad it was, man, he would just reel guys in. He was so good. I mean, he was so good. And we had two of them. Having somebody that good liberated me. Well, we've got a God who's bigger than your biggest circumstance. And you may feel like you're behind. Well, you got an All-American plus on your team. And he can handle what you're facing. If we were to go through the Bible starting in Genesis and go through Revelation, do you know clearly what God's number one command to his people is? Clearly, do not what? Do not fear. And Christ puts the stamp on that because death is the thing that seems so terminal, that seems so final. But he said, no, I've overcome that. So my question to you is, what is causing you to fear? What is keeping you up at what I can't think, I can't let go? Is it a job? Is it an illness? Is it your kids? Is it what is it? Your health? God said, I got that. I got that. So Andy, then are you saying everything's going to have a perfect out? Everything's going to be fine? No. I'm not saying that. This Peter who was so bold, eventually was crucified upside down. And 10 of those 11 disciples that were in the room but came to know and became the leaders of the church, they died martyr's death. The 11th John was banished to an island of Patmos because of his faith. So don't let me sugarcoat it. But they embraced that because they knew whatever they faced, God had it. I don't have to live in fear. Jesus came so you and I don't have to live in fear. But there's something that separates from God, and that's our attitude towards Him, our rebellion. In our own way, we either actively or passively, we say, God, you go your way, I'll go mine. I'll do my own thing. God created us to be in a relationship with Him. Jesus came to live the life we're supposed to live. He lived in perfect submission to the Father right up to the point in a mockery of a trial. He was found guilty, term intentionally in quotes, crucified on a cross, certified dead on a Friday, but rose on a Sunday to pay the penalty for your rebellion and mine. If you never trusted Christ, I invite you to do that right now. He'll forgive your sin. He'll restore your heart, allow you to live the way you were designed to live in relationship to God, and begin to build the base where you don't have to live in fear because He has overcome life's biggest fear, and that is death. Tony Evans tells a story. Man was driving in a car with his little boy, and there's a bee in the car. And the kid freaks out because he doesn't want to get stung. So the man grabs the bee and holds on to it. Then he eventually lets go, and it continues to buzz around, and the kid starts freaking out again. And you know what the dad says? I took the stinger. All that bee can do is make noise now. Do you understand that's what Jesus did on the first Easter? When it comes to death and everything else, He took the stinger. All that thing can do is make noise now. Many of us have been in a relationship with God a while, and we know that, man, we know this, Pastor, we know this. But we've given in to fear, haven't we? And we've failed in one way or many ways, right? The message of Easter is there's restoration. Remember Peter? That was a pretty big failure. That was a pretty big flame out. But he is the one who championed the gospel in the early first century of the church. You know, Mark's an interesting gospel. Most early manuscripts have it ending in verse 8, and some of you will have an addition put on, but those are not in the early manuscripts. So the whole thing ends with people being afraid. Go tell the disciples. They didn't do anything. Remember, the disciples, or at least the women showed up. The disciples, and it ends in fear. Why? Now, this is speculative. But scholars look at internal clues, and they think Mark was probably written 60 to 65 AD. And that was when the church was enduring its first empire-wide sustained persecution. And probably a lot of Christians were failing, and they were thinking, God, man, I'm not like those first Christians, those super Christians. No, they weren't super Christians. They failed. And they needed the grace of God, just like you and I need the grace of God every day so we're not enslaved to fear. Can I ask you what's going on right now? What is it that's causing you fear? Think about this. Consider this. Those circumstances may be the place where God shows up and shows out in your life, in my life. When we're in desperate need, God is on display. His greatness shows in our weakness. So I'm going to return to those two All-American swimmers if I can. You know where they really showed out? On a relay. So you swim the backstroke, the breaststroke, butterfly. You got 3 swimmers swimming 50 yards each. It's 150 yards at 200. They'll swim the last 50. And we're 10 feet behind when these guys swim the anchored leg. And they make up that 10 feet in the first 15 yards. And by the time they go down to flip the turn, it's like, this one's over. This one's over. I mean, these guys are studs. Why did it become so obvious? Because we were behind. And they just reeled them in like that. And we won by 10 feet. Because these guys were so good. Do you think God might want to show up in your life? Man, I got nothing. Yeah, you got nothing. Let's see what God can do. Let's see him show up. Let's see him on display. When you and I are flat in our back, we got no chance. In your issue of fear, I want to suggest to you, God wants to show up and show off and show out. Would you be available to what he wants to do in your life? Let me return to Apollo 13. If you've seen this movie, the close of it, to me it's the ultimate feel-good tearjerker. Because they're coming back in. And when they enter the atmosphere, there's going to be 5 minutes or so of radio silence. Nothing can be communicated. And the question is, were the heat shields damaged to the point that they won't protect the lunar module and it'll just burn up? So there's 3 to 5 minutes of silence in mission control. And occasionally someone would call out to the module and nothing. And nothing. And nothing. And the tension builds. Then all of a sudden, the lunar module breaks through, and Jim Lovell, played by Tom Hanks, says, Houston, and man, the place explodes. It explodes. The celebration is epic. Why? They thought these 3 guys were lost, and they were going to be out in space, and now they're back. And that is worth celebrating. Now, one has died. He died 9 years later, Fred Heise, because of cancer. 2 are still living, when I looked on Wikipedia. They're 96 and 91. So maybe they've got 5 more years, maybe, hopefully. So that bought 60 years. That happened in 1970 to 2030. We got these guys 60 years. They got to see their kids raised. They got to see their grandkids. But 60 years, and that's a celebration. So here's my question. If that's worth celebrating, how about Jesus, who brought back the life of untold people, not for 60 years, but for an eternity? That's why we sing about the living hope. That's why we sing about the God who is resurrected. That's why we sing about our King. He brought us back. And oh, by the way, in the process, he gave us the power to overcome fear. We don't have to live that way. Embracing the resurrected Christ, I would argue, empowers us like nothing else to live free of fear.